in the heart of the vast African grasslands, where the sun glowed like molten gold and ancient baobab trees stretched their arms toward the heavens, lived a young woman named Akia, known across her village not only for her grace but for her long, braided hair that reached down to her waist like streams of midnight silk, a symbol of her ancestry, strength, and spiritual connection to the women who came before her. But on the night that would forever scar her soul, she found herself dragged into the shadows by masked figures whose eyes glimmered with a cold cruelty she had never known, bound with coarse rope that bit into her wrists and ankles. She was thrown onto the dusty ground as the moon cast a pale blue glow across her trembling body, and as fear surged through her veins, she tried to make sense of why this was happening, but her voice was muffled, her heart pounding so violently that she thought it would rip through her chest. And then the leader, a towering man with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward, holding a rusted blade, his voice dripping with venom as he declared that her pride, would be taken as punishment for a secret she supposedly carried, a secret she herself didn't even know. Akia begged through her gag, tears spilling down her cheeks as the man fist-gripped her braids and raised the blade, slicing through the first lock with brutal force, and she felt the weight fall to the ground like a shattered piece of her identity, each cut sending a wave of helplessness through her, each strand symbolizing generations of blessings being stripped away. But even as dread crawled through her, she refused to break, staring defiantly into the eyes of her captors as they shaved her head, leaving her scalp raw and exposed to the cold night air. And when they finally untied her and pushed her toward the edge of the forest, she stumbled, feeling the wind on her bare head for the first time, a strange mixture of shame and fury boiling within her. But what shocked her most was not the humiliation, nor the violence, nor the haunting whispers of the attackers. What shocked her was the moment she caught their scent, a familiar blend of smoked herbs and black palm oil used only by the inner council of the village eldersmen she had trusted her entire life, men who were supposed to protect her, not destroy her. And as she collapsed behind a thick cluster of thorn bushes, she finally understood the truth. They shaved her not out of cruelty, but out of fear, because something powerful, something forbidden, was awakening inside her, something even she had not sensed yet, a force these elders wanted to suppress before it consumed the entire village. And as she sat trembling beneath the whispering branches, her scalp tingling not only with pain but with an unexplained heat crawling beneath her skin, Akia realized the elders might have made the greatest mistake of their lives, because by stripping her of her hair, the very act meant to weaken her was unlocking something ancient, fierce, and uncontainable within her, something that would soon rise from the ashes of her grief, like a storm that would rewrite the fate of every life under the African sky. As dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the sky in bands of soft amber and rose, Akia rose from the thorn bushes where she had hidden through the night, her body sore, her scalp stinging with every whisper of wind. Yet inside her chest burned a new kind of fire, one she did not understand but could feel spreading through her veins like molten light. And as she made her way through the forest, stepping over roots and brushing past rustling leaves, she kept replaying the horrifying moment when she recognized the scent of the elders on her attackers, a betrayal so deep it made her stomach twist. But more disturbing was the strange heat radiating beneath her freshly shaven scalp, almost like a heartbeat pulsing from the top of her skull, and with every step it grew stronger, until she felt something in the air shift, something ancient, something aware of her presence. Suddenly the forest around her seemed to listen, the trees leaning in slightly as though drawn to her, the ground vibrating under her feet with a faint hum she couldn't explain. And when she paused beside a narrow river with water clear enough to reflect every detail of her newly exposed head, she gasped, not at her appearance, but at the faint golden glow rising from her skin, rippling like sunlight under water. And as she touched her scalp with trembling fingers, the glow flared brighter, sending a warm wave spiraling down her spine. So powerful she had to grip a rock to steady herself. Memories she had never lived began flashing behind her eyes, visions of ancient women standing on mountains, their hair braided with gold threads, their hands raised as storms obeyed their command, their eyes burning with the same golden glow now shimmering beneath Akia's skin. Visions so vivid and overwhelming, she stumbled backward and fell to her knees, panting as the images vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving her with only one truth: she was connected to something far older than the village elders had ever told her, something they feared enough to strip her hair in the dead of night, hoping to sever her link to the ancestral power they had been hiding for generations. Determined to find answers, she made her way toward the outskirts of the village, keeping to the shadows, and as she neared the familiar red clay huts, she spotted the elders gathered around the sacred fire pit, their faces grim, their voices hushed and tense as they spoke of the awakening and the girl who must not escape, words that ignited both fury and fear inside her. But before she could retreat, a voice as soft as a breeze murmured her name from behind, and she turned to see an elderly woman she had always known as Amma, the village healer, someone who had nurtured her since childhood with herbal teas and kind proverbs. Yet now her eyes glowed faintly, just like Akia's had moments ago, and before Akia could speak, Amma pressed a finger to her lips, guiding her silently into a concealed hut built into the hillside, a place Akia had never seen before, despite living her entire life in the village. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning sage and ancient symbols painted across the mud walls, each one swirling with a soft golden shimmer. And Amma finally spoke, her voice trembling with urgency as she revealed the truth. Akia belonged to a lineage of sun-blessed women, beings believed to be extinct, women whose spiritual power was passed through their hair, making their braids not merely a symbol of beauty, but a vessel of ancestral energy so potent it could reshape the natural world. And the elders, terrified that her awakening would expose the lies they had fed the village for decades, shaved her and attempted to suppress her power before it fully rose. But their actions had backfired, because removing her hair had only accelerated the awakening, releasing the energy they hoped to destroy. Trembling at the revelation, Akia asked why Amma was helping her, and with a heavy sigh, the old healer admitted she too once carried the sun blessing before the elders stripped her power through ritual, leaving her weak but still aware of the ancient forces. And now, with her final strength fading, Ama pressed a small golden stone into Akia's hand, a relic from the first sun-blessed queen, telling her that the power inside her was only the beginning, and that before the sun reached its highest point, the elders would come for her again. This time, not to weaken her, but to destroy her completely, unless she learned to control the storm rising inside her. With the golden stone clutched tightly in her palm and Amma's trembling warning echoing in her ears, Akia felt the weight of destiny pressing down on her as she stepped out of the hidden hut and into the cool morning air, where the wind carried a strange electric charge that prickled across her exposed scalp, making her acutely aware that time was running out. And as she hurried toward the forest's edge to avoid being spotted by any wandering villagers, the ground beneath her feet seemed to vibrate faintly in response to her presence, as though the earth itself recognized her awakening and strained to follow her command. But with every hurried step came the memory of Amma's frail voice telling her that the elders would return for her before midday, a truth that sent a shiver down her spine. Yet the fear mingled with a rising fury, a deep, simmering rage at the betrayal of the very men who claimed to guide the village with wisdom. And when she reached a clearing, she paused to catch her breath, feeling the golden stone pulse softly in her hand, its warmth spreading through her body like sunlight pouring through her veins, awakening something powerful and almost uncontrollable, a force that made her fingertips tingle and the air around her shimmer with faint waves. Suddenly the forest rustled behind her, and with instincts she didn't know she possessed, Akia spun around, raising her hand defensively, only to see a young boy named Kofi stumble out from behind a tree, his eyes wide with fear, his small chest heaving as he whispered her name, explaining that he had seen the elders searching for her with spears and sacred ropes, muttering that the demon girl must not reach the sun, and Akia, despite her terror, knelt in front of him, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder as she assured him she was no demon, though deep inside she questioned whether the power rising in her truly belonged to something holy or something dangerous. But before she could think further, a sharp whistle echoed through the trees, a signal she recognized instantly as the elders hunting Kaland. Kofi's face blanched with terror as he urged her to run. But instead of fleeing, Akia felt a sudden surge of strength, a fierce, burning energy that demanded she stop hiding and start fighting. So she guided Kofi toward a safe hollow in the roots of a giant baobab tree, telling him not to come out no matter what happened. And as he disappeared into the shadows, she stepped forward into the open clearing, gripping the golden stone so tightly it almost fused with her skin. The elders emerged through the trees moments later, their faces grim, their eyes cold. And at their center stood the scarred leader who had shaved her head, but now he held a curved ritual blade that shimmered with dark energy, and with a voice dripping with false righteousness, he declared that Akia had become a threat to the village, that her power would bring ruin to them all, and that she must surrender herself to their cleansing ceremony before the sun reached its peak. But Akia, trembling yet unbroken, stood tall, her bare head glowing faintly with dawn's reflection, and she demanded answers, asking why they had lied, why they had hidden the truth of the sun-blessed women, why they had feared her so deeply that they would resort to violence. Her words seemed to shake something inside the elders, for they exchanged nervous glances. But the scarred leader stepped forward and confessed with chilling honesty that the sun-blessed were once rulers, powerful enough to command storms and shift the soil, and that their return threatened the council's control and authority. So generations ago, the elders before them had sworn to eradicate every last one, ensuring that the villagers would remain dependent on the council, instead of embracing their true ancestral power. And when Akia heard this, her heart cracked with grief and anger. The betrayal, too heavy to bear, and as the first beam of sunlight pierced the treetops and landed directly on her exposed scalp, the golden stone in her hand erupted with blinding light, sending a fierce pulse of energy through her body. The air around her exploded in a storm of swirling dust and shimmering gold as the ground trembled violently, and the elders staggered backward, shielding their faces from the radiance pouring out of her. And in that moment, Akia realized that the power she carried was no curse, it was liberation, and she was no longer the frightened girl bound under the moonlight, but the awakening storm her ancestors had promised would one day return. As the golden light from Akia's hand surged and danced like molten fire across the clearing, the elders stumbled backward, their robes flapping wildly in the sudden wind that rose around her. And the scarred leader's eyes widened in disbelief, realizing for the first time that their centuries-old fear had not been unfounded, that the sun-blessed power they had tried to suppress was not only real, but far stronger than any of them had anticipated. And in that instant, Akia felt a clarity she had never known before. The anger, the fear, the betrayal, all converged into a single, focused purpose, and she raised her arms, letting the energy flow freely through her body, the golden light stretching outward, bending the air and making the leaves shimmer as if dusted with sunlight, while the ground beneath her trembled, cracking in places, as if the earth itself acknowledged the return of the sun-blessed lineage. The elders, desperate now, began chanting in unison, words of ancient incantation meant to bind and subdue, but their voices faltered against the raw, untamed force radiating from Akia, and with each chant, sparks of gold danced around her, coiling like serpents ready to strike, and she realized that the act meant to destroy her had instead awakened a latent command over nature itself, a connection to the winds, the soil, the very essence of the African plains. And with that realization, she felt the first true surge of empowerment coursing through her veins, her mind opening to visions of the world as it had been before the elders' fear had suffocated the sun-blessed. Visions of women walking freely, commanding storms and guiding crops, their voices resonating with the pulse of the earth. And suddenly she understood that she had a choice. She could unleash her power fully, risking destruction, or she could channel it, harnessing the ancestral strength that had flowed through generations to reclaim the balance the elders had shattered. With a deep breath, she focused on the golden stone, which now seemed to hum in harmony with her heartbeat, and directed its energy outward, weaving a protective barrier around herself and the clearing, forcing the elders to retreat, stumbling as the earth beneath their feet resisted their every step. And as they fell back, Akia's gaze swept across the forest, spotting movement, village children peering cautiously from behind trees, eyes wide with fear and awe, and Kofi among them, his small face pale but brimming with trust, reminding her that this power was not just for revenge, but for protection and restoration. and she realized that the elders had never understood that true strength came not from suppression and fear, but from guidance and respect. And with a surge of determination, she extended her hands toward the elders again. This time not with anger, but with command, sending a pulse of golden light that gently lifted them off the ground, suspending them mid-air as their robes fluttered and their chants faltered. And she spoke, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority, declaring that the era of lies and hidden truths had ended, that the village and its people would now know the story of the sun-blessed women, that balance must be restored before the land itself turned against them. The scarred leader, gasping for breath and blinking against the dazzling energy, tried to plead, but Akia's mind was clear, her heart aligned with the power flowing through her, and she lifted her head, feeling the wind swirl around her bare scalp, the sensation electric yet grounding. And in that moment, a gentle rain began to fall. Soft droplets, shimmering with a golden hue, washing over her and the elders alike, cleansing the anger and fear, but leaving the lesson of the awakening forever imprinted upon them. And as the first rays of the sun climbed higher into the sky, Akia knew that this was only the beginning, that the power she had inherited was not merely for the moment, but for the generations to come, and that her journey would take her beyond the plains, across rivers and mountains, to awaken others like her, to heal the wounds left by fear and secrecy, and to ensure that never again would the brilliance of the sun-blessed be hidden beneath the shadow of betrayal. As the golden rain continued to fall, shimmering across the forest floor and soaking into Akia's bare head, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection to everything around Hertha, trees, the animals, the river flowing nearby, and even the wind that whispered secrets through the leaves. And with each breath, the energy inside her grew stronger, no longer a wild, uncontrollable force, but a living, breathing extension of herself. And as she focused, visions of other sun-blessed women began to appear before her eyes, translucent yet vivid, guiding her, teaching her how to harness this incredible power responsibly, showing her how to shape it, bend it, and protect it so that it could serve the people rather than destroy them. And with their guidance, she began to understand the full extent of her abilities, from commanding storms to accelerating the growth of crops, to sensing danger and healing wounds. And as these realizations took root, she felt a deep compassion for the very elders who had tried to suppress her, understanding that their fear, while misguided, had come from generations of indoctrination. But she also knew that mercy would not be enough. Accountability was necessary to restore balance, and as the elders fell to the ground, shivering and broken, Akia walked toward them, her every step radiating confidence and purpose, the golden stone still glowing in her hand like a sun captured in flesh. And when she reached the scarred leader, he looked up at her with a mixture of fear and awe, begging for forgiveness. But she held up her hand, commanding silence, and declared that the true test of power was not vengeance, but wisdom, and that they must now serve as guides rather than rulers, tasked with preserving the knowledge they had hidden, teaching the villagers about the sun-blessed heritage and the responsibility that came with it, while she, Akia, would ensure that no one ever again would be silenced, chained, or shamed for their ancestral gifts. And as she spoke, the forest seemed to respond. A warm, golden light spreading through the leaves, the river sparkling like molten glass, the animals pausing to watch her, acknowledging her authority. And in that moment, Kofi and the other children emerged from their hiding places, rushing toward her with awe and admiration, and she knelt, embracing them, feeling the love of her people anchoring her power, reminding her that strength without compassion was hollow. And as the sun reached its zenith, Akia lifted the golden stone high, releasing a pulse of radiant light that washed over the entire village, revealing the hidden truths, the history of the sun-blessed women, the lies of the elders, and the promise of a new era. And with that single gesture, the villagers gasped, some in fear, some in wonder, but all aware that their world had irrevocably changed. And as the elders rose to their feet, humbled and enlightened, Akia felt the last remnants of anger drain from her soul, replaced with a determined calm, knowing that her journey was far from over, that the power she now commanded would take her to distant lands, through rivers and mountains, to awaken others who had been hidden in plain sight, and that each step of her path would be guided by the wisdom of those who had come before, the love of those who believed in her, and the unbreakable force of the sun-blessed lineage flowing through her veins like a river of golden fire. After the golden light settled over the village, and the elders bowed to the truth of Akia's power, she felt a pull deep within her, a calling that seemed to stretch beyond the trees, across the rivers, and into the distant mountains, urging her to venture beyond the familiar lands of her childhood, to discover others like herself, and to awaken the sun-blessed lineage across the continent. And with a resolute heart, she began preparing for the journey, gathering supplies and speaking to Ame one last time, who pressed into her hands a small pouch filled with rare herbs and sacred writings that would guide her when the road became perilous, whispering that Akia's path would be tested by both human greed and natural forces, and that each challenge was designed to strengthen her spirit and control her burgeoning abilities. And as Akia stepped out of the village for the first time in years, the children and villagers lined the edges of the path, their eyes filled with hope and awe, and she could feel the golden energy from the stone resonating with the earth beneath her feet, guiding her forward like a pulse of destiny. And as she walked through the savannah, the wind swirling around her freshly shaven head, she sensed that the forests, the rivers, and even the mountains themselves were alive, listening, waiting to respond to her command if she proved worthy. And her first test came sooner than expected, when a distant rumble shook the ground beneath her, and a pack of wild lions emerged from the tall grass, their eyes glinting with hunger and challenge. Yet, instead of fear, Akia felt calm, sensing the ancient energy of the land flowing through her veins, and she lifted her hands, allowing the golden light to flow outward, shimmering like liquid sunlight, creating a barrier that held the lions at bay without harm, their snarls fading into cautious curiosity. And she realized that her powers were not meant to dominate, but to harmonize, to bring balance, and that the sun-blessed women had always been guardians of nature, mediators between humans and the wild. And as the lions retreated gracefully, the ground settled, and a sense of profound satisfaction washed over her, affirming that she was on the right path. And as the day stretched on, Akia traversed rivers, climbed rocky hills, and passed through dense forests, each step awakening more of the energy within her, making the golden stone hum with warmth and light. And during the night, she camped beneath a canopy of stars, feeling a connection to every sun-blessed woman who had walked before her, their whispers carried in the breeze, teaching her control, patience, and wisdom. And in that moment of stillness, she reflected on how far she had come from being bound and shamed, her hair cruelly removed, to now standing as the living embodiment of her lineage, radiant, powerful, and unbroken. And she understood that the elders' attempt to suppress her had only served to ignite the storm of her true potential. And as she drifted into a light sleep beneath the African sky, she vowed silently that no force, no fear, and no betrayal would ever again dictate the destiny of the sun-blessed women, for she had embraced her power fully, and with it the responsibility to awaken, protect, and guide those like her, ensuring that the lineage would never again be hidden, and that the story of the sun-blessed, once buried in fear and secrecy, would shine across the lands, a golden legacy carried forward, the woman who had risen from chains, humiliation, and betrayal to become a living beacon of hope, strength, and balance. As the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, painting the savannah in shades of amber and gold, Akia felt the culmination of her journey pressing forward, the golden stone pulsing with a fierce, steady rhythm in her hand. And she knew that her final test awaited beyond the distant mountains, where legends spoke of the lost sun-blessed sanctuary, a place where her ancestors had once trained and awakened fully in harmony with the earth, sky, and spirit. And as she climbed the rocky paths, wind whipping across her bare scalp, she encountered signs of the trials to come, trees scarred by lightning, rocks cracked as if the land itself had been shaped by powerful forces, and whispering winds carrying voices that tested her resolve, challenging her to confront fear, doubt, and the memories of betrayal that still lingered in her heart. Yet, with each step, she felt herself growing stronger, more attuned to the energy that pulsed through every living thing. And when she reached a high plateau overlooking a valley bathed in early sunlight, she saw them, figures of past sun-blessed women, translucent yet radiant, standing in formation, their eyes blazing with approval and expectation. And Akia realized that they were testing not her power, but her wisdom, her compassion, and her ability to lead with balance rather than dominance. And as she took a deep breath, the golden stone in her hand flaring brilliantly, she focused inward, letting the energy flow through her core, harmonizing with the land beneath her feet, the wind around her, the sky above. And suddenly the figures stepped forward, merging their light with hers, creating a symphony of golden radiance that stretched across the valley, causing the trees to sway in rhythm, the river to sparkle like molten gold, and the animals below to pause in reverent stillness. And Akia felt every ounce of fear, shame, and doubt from the night she had been bound and shorn of her hair dissolve into the warmth and clarity of ancestral power. For she understood fully that her strength was never meant to intimidate. It was meant to awaken, guide, and protect. And in that moment, she heard the faint sound of the elders' voices far below, murmuring prayers of acknowledgement and apology. And she knew that their hearts had changed, that the balance had begun to restore itself. And with a final surge of golden energy, she reached out to the valley below, sending waves of light cascading over the land, healing, energizing, and awakening the dormant potential of all sun-blessed descendants hidden throughout the region. And as the light settled, the figures of her ancestors smiled, bowing gracefully, fading into the brilliance that now belonged fully to a king. And as she lowered her hands, she felt a calmness she had never known, a sense of completion and purpose that resonated deep within her bones. And with the first true smile in days, she began the descent into the valley, greeted by villagers, children, and even the humbled elders, who now looked upon her not with fear but with respect and awe. And Akia knew that this was only the beginning of her mission to awaken others, to protect the sun-blessed lineage, and to ensure that no woman would ever again be bound, shamed, or silenced for the gift she carried. And as the golden sunlight bathed the valley in its warmth, reflecting off the stone that had guided her, Akia, once a girl forced to endure humiliation and pain, now stood as a beacon of hope, power, and unbreakable spirit. Her bare head a symbol not of what was taken from her, but of the extraordinary destiny she had claimed, a destiny that would ripple through generations, reshaping her world and illuminating the path of the sun-blessed for all time, proving that even in the face of betrayal and cruelty, strength, courage, and ancestral wisdom could rise, unstoppable, eternal, and transformative.